Welcome to Why It's Straight Television. I'm your host, Matthew Salanoa, a filmmaker of over 17 years, here to bring you the filmmaker's perspective on television. Today I'm talking about the incredible Japanese anime Uzumaki. Now, Uzumaki, I believe, came out last year or maybe the year before, but again, I don't have Max at the moment. I was just like last week with Lioness. I was visiting my parents' house. They have Max, and so I've been curious about Uzumaki for some time because the visuals and the trailer just looked fascinating. And I must say, hats off to creator Junji Ito. I hope I'm saying your name right. This, this This was a great show. I haven't watched that much anime, so, my experience with it, not very wide, but I was really impressed with this show. I appreciate first, right off the top, for those of you who don't know what Uzumaki is a show about the residents of this little town where, for some reason, this spiral sickness is occurring to everyone, where at first it's just one individual who's seeing spirals everywhere he goes. And then we start to see the spiral smokestacks, the spiral smoke rings appear in the air. And then slowly but surely, weird things happen. Like one girl has spirals grow out of her hair. One guy has a spiral on his back that then morphs him into this literal snail. You know what I mean? And the parents of the main character, one of the dad starts. He's always been into pottery, but he starts working spirals into all of his art. Spirals literally take over this town, and it is a very creepy, unsettling show. I am a big fan of the film Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978, starring Donald Sutherland and Jeff Goldblum. That movie always got under my skin with the subtle body horror that appears when the body snatchers, they would take over people in their sleep, and you'd see their deformed growth as they replicate the people that they're taking over. And that movie always unsettled me. Zombies and taking over bodies always unsettles me. Uzumaki also reminds me a bit of The Thing, so it's a little bit of both, because you're just seeing people have these infections over time of this spiral, and it mutates everyone in a completely different way. And every episode, I would say, is creepy and bizarre. And I loved it from beginning to end. I mean, I loved it dreadfully, but I loved it from beginning to end. The first two episodes are very subtle ish, but then you get into the last two episodes, and it's just increasingly creepy and more body horror like. And I watched the show in the mix of watching Lioness and other stuff, so my memory's a bit messed up. But I just want to shout out to a couple subplots in the show that I thought were especially worth mentioning. And so this is going to be a little bit spoilerful. So if you just want my spoiler-free thoughts, I think if you like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 1978 film, if you like John Carpenter's The Thing, then this show is up your alley. You should check it out. Stylistically, what I like about it is that it's drawn in this very super basic kind of manga style. It's so basic looking, which is off-putting. At first, I don't like it. But then when all the creepy things happen, and you see, like, there's an episode where women become kind of like these mosquito-like characters. They're not fully mosquito, and they're not fully women either. But what they're doing is so horrific, But I think, and then, of course, with people turning into snails, as the style becomes more body horror, I'm grateful that it's done in this simple manga style, because it's so horrific. I think if it had gone any more real, any more typical anime that we're used to in today's form, I think it would just outright disturb people and people wouldn't want to watch it. I think there was the best call to make this such a simple looking art style, because once things get wild, it actually makes the scary parts scarier for me. That was my experience. So spoiler free. Like I said, if you like John Carpenter's The Thing, I think you'll get a kick out of Uzumaki. But I just want to spoil it a little bit because I want to talk about some of my favorite stuff. The first thing I want to talk about, I brought up the girl with the hair, the main character. After seeing other people become deformed by the spirals, and what's weird is that it's almost like an anthology. It's almost like all these weird things happen across the episodes, and characters kind of forget. They kind of forget that these things are happening, and they keep walking into new situations and being horrified. And I brought this up. I watched this with my buddy, my nerd brother, and I brought it up. I was like, "What do you think that's about?" Because I didn't consider it a problem necessarily, but it did just make me wonder what's going on. And he mentioned how, well, you see the smoke spirals going up, so everyone's breathing it in. So they're kind of like in a trance. They're kind of in a dreamlike trance where they're not really sure they're experiencing it. I thought that's probably what's going on, because it's so weird that you get the crazy hospital. The hospital episode, episode 3, is where we get the crazy women who are like mosquitoes, and so creepy, so creepy. But the fact of the matter is, they get out of that episode and they just kind of, they don't tell the police or anything. Well, they do try to tell some people, but after the things get really heinous, they don't tell the police or anything, and they're just kind of off into another adventure of, oh, there's more spiral stuff going on. But the first thing I want to mention is that when the spirals start affecting the main character, and we've already had one guy turn into a snail, and everyone just kind of accepts that he's crawling along the side of the building of the school. That's freaky enough. But then we get to the main character, and all of a sudden her hair starts curling, and the next, before she knows it, her hair is standing a whole 5 feet tall, and it's all these massive crazy spirals. And another girl gets jealous and her hair starts to spiral too, and you see her kind of competing to have the most crazy hairstyle, even though the main character doesn't want it, but just because it attracts attention. And I just thought, wow, that's such a interesting thing, that this show, while it's dealing with this bizarre scenario, it still shows the kind of pettiness of people, of the desire to be popular, or the desire to be, seen, that even to get this thing that's clearly not good for you, and it's clearly a sickness, even that's worth it just to be seen by other people. But it ends up being to that girl's detriment, because we find her later that she's been killed by the hair. And with the main character, luckily someone cuts off the hair. But at first, when she tries to cut off the hair herself, the hair tries to strangle and kill her. So it's just really bizarre. This is such a bizarre show. But hands down, my favorite episode, episode 3, is when she's in the hospital. I forget what happened. She's in the hospital, and there's all these pregnant women, and there's this problem going on in this episode where all of a sudden there's these killer mosquitoes running around biting people to death. Swarms of mosquitoes biting people literally to death. And that's so freaky by itself. But then all of a sudden, this room of pregnant women who are all expecting soon, they start losing their minds, and they start getting tools to cut holes into people and suck their blood and suck them dry. And it's this really scary episode where we think the main character is going to get it, and she gets out by the hair of her chinny chin chin. And it's to me, like, I felt like, although things that happen later are freakier, because of the bizarre body horror and the fact that we're still kind of somewhat in the real world, for whatever that's worth or whatever that means, that episode just freaks me out the most. It really unsettled me and got under my skin. And then my second favorite episode is actually the last episode where everything goes haywire, where all of a sudden now the main characters are trying to escape the town. And then we get another bizarre anime thing where there's these guys who can create cyclones that they fly in and they fly around doing, and people just kind of accept that that's happening. And it's very strange, the. But at this point, you realize it's been 3 episodes of people just accepting strange things that are happening, and you're like, okay, forget it. I'm not going to question this because, again, they're in the trance. This is just the trance, and the craziest thing is watching when they try to leave the town and they walk through the woods and find themselves back in the town, that they find that all of a sudden the town has changed and all of the buildings and homes have been sort of combined into a spiral, and all of the citizens have merged into this mass, this biomass of bodies, and it's really just unnerving. And it's sad because the main character, has a little brother, and I'm like rooting for the main character and the little brother to get out of it. But oh, sadly, the little brother also ends up having the snail spiral. So a lot of people are just turning into snails. But we also get all these other characters who are trying to escape the town, but they're slowly going mad and hungry because they haven't eaten. And all of a sudden, they start looking at other people have gone mad and started eating the snail people, and they see snail people body parts all over the place, and they start going, when you look at it, it kind of looks delicious. And it's like, oh no. And so our main character and her brother, they're trying to get away from these crazy guys who, one of the crazy guys turns into a snail right in front of him, and he realizes he's going to get eaten and hides himself inside his shell. And that's when one of the crazy guys just goes, hey. And all the crazy guys at first are disappointed. Oh, he's in his shell. And one of them goes, hey, no, well, how do the bugs eat them? They just crawl right in there and eat them. And he literally gets down, and the shell does not seem like it's big enough for a body. And then he just squeezes himself all the way in there and starts eating the guy. And you don't see the eating, but you hear it, and you hear the squirming and the squealing, and it's just so haunting and unnerving. I think that's I did not expect any of this from this show. I knew it was going to be wild and weird and creepy, but I did not expect to be so perfectly unnerved by it, where it was literally in my bones. Like one of the reasons I'm a big fan of zombies. I love zombie movies and zombie shows. Not that I watch literally everything, but I want to watch as much as I can. But part of the reason I love it is because I guess I'm afraid of human beings in the first place, and so nothing's more terrifying to me than a group of people that are after you for some, unruly cause. But to that end, I think that's what really creeps me out with this show. Is Uzumaki is all about how regular people become morphed into violent killers, and for whatever the reason is, whether it's kind of like this drug-like induced, I'm a mosquito and I just drink your blood, or whether it's the madness of hunger, just basic hunger, and starting to eat each other. I think that's something that really hits with this show, is that it's about human horror. And I think Japanese movies and shows, I assume it's because of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, but Japanese movies and shows are very in tune to human horror, and just how terrible human horror can be. And I have friends who are not Japanese who talk about how yeah, their grandparents survived and witnessed the horror of Japan trying to conquer Asia. And so there's this kind of odd self reflectiveness of that. Yes, the bombs that happened were absolutely horrible. The things we experienced were heinous, but it was also kind of like a check on us because we were also doing horrible, heinous things. And that's kind of something America's always in a deadlock in, that we know we're doing heinous things, but we can't stop the government from doing it. But I think just to that end, I think the acknowledgement of human horror, but presented in this fantasy way, I think is the power and the strength of Uzumaki. Because again, like I said, I love zombies, and to me, zombies are disguised human horror. You hear about, you know, the group led assaults on women in India, or you hear about human trafficking, you hear about the terrible things that people do to each other out in the world. And it's terrifying. And I think, to me, what zombies represent is just that baseline fear that there's another human body that doesn't care that I'm a human and is going to do horrific things to me out of a ravenous desire that can't be quelled by reason or by anything. And it's just, that's the real human horror that, to me, zombies represent. And to that end, Uzumaki also represents, by putting it in this fantasy lens of people turning into snails or merging with each other in horrific ways. You're talking about the history of human horror that, in many ways, is not too different from the horrible things animals and creatures already do to each other in the real world just to survive. But I just think it's a very interesting perspective. I don't know if I'm even getting it right, but that's when I'm picking up from watching it. I'm very impressed with Uzumaki, just in terms of its artistic choices. I think the style is fantastic. I think the ending was like, I don't want to say underwhelming. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think the ending is kind of beautiful because the main character the whole time is getting protected by this guy who clearly loves her, but they don't embrace their love until the very last scene. And that's when they just join the rest of humanity in being morphed into this spiral. And it's kind of tragic, but it's kind of bittersweet. It's beautiful that, she's looking for her parents when they're trying to escape, and she finds her parents, although they're morphed into the bodies, she does find them together. And I think it's very beautiful that when she finally accepts that this inevitable death, this horrific death, is coming to her, that she also romantically accepts the guy who's been looking out for her this whole time. And then they just merge and swirl together. I thought, it's unexpected. It's not what I wanted them to escape and survive, but that's clearly not what's going to happen. But it's beautiful. It's kind of touching. I think this show, for 4 episodes, packs the punch of like a beautifully told 8-episode anthology. It really, I swear, within episodes, it feels like there's 2 episodes going on. You know what I mean? I can't put my finger on it. But what I've mentioned is just the stuff that I could definitely remember. I really think Uzumaki deserves your time. If you have Max, or if you know someone who has Max, check it out. Uzumaki, again, it's a body horror. If you like The Fly, if you like Invasion of the Body Snatchers 1978, or John Carpenter's The Thing, I think you're going to get a kick out of Uzumaki. It's not going to be for everybody. It really is a pretty heavy show, but I think it's top notch. I think it absolutely deserves to be under the banner of why it's great television. I absolutely think it's high art, it's strong art, it deserves respect. Hats off to Junji Ito and your whole cast and crew. I mean, I thought that even down to the voices were so distinct. I think we've lost that for a little while in American animation, that especially like the movie Transformers Rise of the Beasts, I think is the biggest example of where the voices don't sound right, they don't fit the characters, and half the voices sound identical, and the dialogue is not very good. I think America has really had a drop in the quality of animation storytelling when it comes to voices, and just overall a drop in quality of storytelling. I don't know what these people are trying to do. Do they know what they're doing? I don't know, but I know that when I see something done right, it deserves credit. And I think Uzumaki, from design to casting performances, is a top notch show. If you're a storyteller and a creator and you got a strong stomach, I think you're going to get a kick out of this. It's absolutely something to look at, and don't just take my word for it. What do you see when you see it? I think your own interpretation, you might pull things out that I could never understand. So give it a shot, give it a chance, and yeah, that's what I got to say for Uzumaki. Hats off to the cast and crew. Definitely deserving to be called Why It's Great, because it's great. So thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you next time.